Okay, members, when we have a quorum, we are going to start from the top. We've got about 16 bills today, and the authors are Portantino, Hueso, Brownlee, Allen, Gordon, Hernandez, Davis, Huber, Monning, Garrick, Calderon, Mitchell, and Lara. So if those members are not down here, if you could please come down to the floor. And for the offices that are listening, if your member is not here, you can send them to the floor. We're going to start pretty quickly and move through the file. Okay, Mr. Calderon would like to take the consent calendar up first. Consent calendar is going to be taken up right after we go through all the procedural motions. Okay, members, we ask our guests and visitors in the rear of the chamber. We have a quorum. We ask our guests and members and visitors in the rear of the chamber and in the gallery to please stand for the prayer. We ask our Assembly Chaplain, Father Constantine Papadimos, to offer the day's prayer.
Good morning. Let us pray. Lord, as we approach our observance of Memorial Day, we pause to remember the men and women who have lost their lives in our nation's service. We also bring to mind their families, especially of the fallen warriors who have served in Iraq and Afghanistan. Whether we understand it directly or in a more passive way, they have impacted our lives and have allowed the cause of liberty and freedom to shine around the world. Bless them, Lord, and grant rest to their souls. Amen.
We ask our guests and visitors to remain standing and join us for the flag salute. Please join Assemblymember Berryhill as he leads us in the pledge. Mr. Berryhill.
Please join me in pledging our great country. I pledge allegiance to the flag
You may be seated. Reading of the previous day's journal.
Assembly Chamber, Sacramento, Thursday, May 26, 2011. The Assembly met at 9 a.m. Honorable Fiona Moss, Speaker Pro Tem of the Assembly, presiding. Chief Clerk E. Dawson Wilson at the desk. Reading the card, Timothy Moreland reading. The roll was called. Ashajian, Alejo, Allen, Amiano, Atkins, Berryhill, Block, Blumenfield.
Mr. Calderon moves and Mr. Hagman seconds that the reading of the previous day's journal be dispensed with. Presentations of petitions, there are none. Introduction and reference of bills will be deferred. Reports of committees will be deemed read and amendments deemed adopted. Messages from the Governor, there are none. Messages from the Senate, there are none. Motions and resolutions. The absences for the day will be deemed and read in the journal. Mr. Calderon, you are recognized.
Yes, Madam Speaker and members, I request unanimous consent to suspend Assembly Rule 45.5 to allow Assembly Member Williams to speak on adjourn in memory today.
Without objection.
And also, I move to remove file item. Well, actually, I don't. That's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, business on the daily file. Second reading, there is none. We're going to take up the consent calendar. We are at the second day consent calendar. Does any member wish to remove an item from the second day consent calendar? Seeing and hearing none, clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 452 by Assemblymember Ma, an act relating to privacy.
Okay, clerk will open the roll on the consent calendar. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll and tally the votes. Ayes 46, no 0. The consent calendar, we'll actually move a call on the consent calendar. Okay, Assembly third reading. File items 4 through 7, pass and retain. File item 8 on the amendments, AB 294. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 294 with amendments by Assemblymember Portantino.
Mr. Portantino.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I rise today for purpose of amendments. I respectfully ask that the amendments go out to print and back on file.
Seeing no further questions or debate, and without objection, we will take a voice vote on these amendments. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted. Out to print and back on file. File items 9 through 13, pass and retain. File item 14, AB 1248. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1248 by Assemblymember Hueso, an act relating to local public employees' retirement.
Mr. Hueso.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker and Assembly members. This bill was on the floor on Monday, and it moved forward, and it's the third reading on some minor amendments we made, and I respectfully request an aye vote from all the members today.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Mr. Hueso moves the call. File item 15 through 25, pass and retain. File item 26, AB 515 on the amendments. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 515 with amendments by Assemblymember Brownlee.
Ms. Brownlee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. These are just amendments before you to address some concerns raised and clarifying the intent of this bill, and respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Hagman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We do oppose these amendments and ask for a roll call vote.
Okay, Mr. Hagman. Okay, Mr. Hagman is asking for a roll call vote on these amendments. Mr. Calderon asked for an aye vote. Mr. Hagman asked for a no vote. Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. It's those members present and voting. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 27, noes 15. Amendments are adopted, out to print and back on file. File items 27 and 28 pass and retain. File item 29, AB 679, Mr. Allen. Clerk will read. Sorry, clerk will read. Sorry.
Assembly Bill 679 by Assemblymember Allen, an act relating to land use.
Mr. Allen.
Madam Speaker, fellow members, AB 679 will permit, upon mutual agreement between Napa County and a city within the county, 15% of Napa County's lower income RINA to be transferred. This bill is identical to bills that have been passed back in the 90s by Assemblymember Brown and then Wiggins. It gives the flexibility to the local jurisdiction to build affordable housing. I have continued to meet with the opponents. The opponents were concerned it somehow affected underlying litigation. It does not. I will continue to work with the folks, but essentially this bill will provide for more affordable housing in Napa County. I ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Alejo.
Madam Speaker and members, I rise in opposition of this bill, and I'm saddened to do that as the Vice Chair of the Assembly Local Government Committee. I didn't support this bill in committee because the author had expressed he was going to continue working with affordable housing advocates, and he's done that. He's had extensive meetings with them, but still there hasn't been any amendments made to this bill. And members, this is trying to create a carve-out and exemption once more for the county of Napa, who has a history of not doing their fair share of affordable housing for low-income families, for farm workers in that county. And now they want to shift 15% of their RHNA numbers, the required numbers to meet future affordable housing needs, to shift them to other cities within Napa County. That is rewarding a person who hasn't abided by the rules that all other counties have to abide by. And just like Napa has made a place within the county to create elegant vineyards, to create elegant mansions, Napa has a responsibility to also make a place for farm workers, to make sure that they have decent and affordable housing, that there's that type of housing for our low-income families as well, and the local workforce. We cannot be rewarding once again after we gave them an exemption in '96 and again in 2000. They're coming back to us for a third time to carve out an exemption from the rules that all the rest of our counties have to abide by. I ask for a no vote.
Mr. Hueso.
Thank you. Today I stand in support of this bill, and I want to echo some of the comments that my colleague Alejo made in terms of the intent of what we want to see. However, there are some challenges that have required this bill to come forward in order to build the affordable housing. And I understand this issue very well, having dealt with this in local governments, having spoken with different representatives from Napa and with the author himself. This bill does not remove the obligation of Napa to meet their RHNA numbers, so they will still be obligated to do that. But we've already passed bills on this floor that get to smart growth, and this bill will achieve some of the smart growth principles that we also support here. So I urge an aye vote, and I encourage the author to continue working with his community to make sure the housing is built, because we want to build the housing, but we also want to make sure that it is built. And this bill will pave the way to actually build this housing that has been long in the process.
Mr. Chesbro.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of this bill. Napa County, I represented Napa previously in the State Senate, and two things I want to tell you about Napa. One is that they have a greater commitment to agricultural preservation than any county in the state, and they've been absolute about it, and that's very important. On the other hand, they have not, well, I know Ms. Yamada is going to challenge me on behalf of YOLO. Okay, Napa and YOLO, I'll stipulate. But in addition to that, Napa has shown a tremendous commitment to farm worker housing and has been a leader in the state. But the difference is, and I'm glad the word smart growth was mentioned, because the difference is it needs to be in the right place and it needs to not undermine the agricultural preservation purposes of the county. So this bill is not about resisting the responsibility to build farm worker housing. It's about doing it in the right way that uniquely fits Napa's situation. And I hope everybody in this room will agree Napa's a pretty unique place. And the value of the natural resource that is there needs to be preserved, and the county has endeavored with other jurisdictions, the cities, to integrate those two very, very important priorities. So I urge an aye vote.
Mr. Williams.
Question of the author.
Without objection.
The same number of units would have to be built, correct? It just would take place within one of the member cities of the county instead of out in the unincorporated area, correct?
This bill has no effect on the RHNA obligation of Napa County.
Great. I'm going to rise in support of the bill just because I advocated that the city of Santa Barbara offered to build some of the county's units if, of course, the county would pay for them. And I think that makes sense. That's a smart growth mechanism. It's putting the housing where the jobs is. So I'm going to support it.
Mr. Huffman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of this bill as someone who represents a district that's in many ways similar to Napa County, where we don't have a great record, frankly, on affordable housing, where the economics are very, very challenging to create affordable housing, but where there are some local efforts that are genuinely creative and good faith and even heroic to create affordable housing against all of that backdrop. This is an effort simply to provide the flexibility to let local governments and local community leaders who are trying to create affordable housing not avoid their affordable housing obligations. So I support it. I know Mr. Allen's intentions are absolutely in the direction of making affordable housing happen in a place where we desperately need it, and it's where it's very challenging to move it forward. So I hope we'll all support him in that effort.
Seeing no further questions or debate, Mr. Allen, you may close.
Yes, just 3 points to remember. First of all, this is a district bill that affects Napa County only. Number 2, it does not affect the county's obligations under RINA to build a housing. And number 3, you should remember that I took every amendment offered by the opposition in this bill, and when I met with them in mediation yesterday, they had no further amendments to offer. And so it is not a perfect solution, but I pledge to everyone here I'm going to continue working with the housing advocates because the goal is to provide more affordable housing in that county. Thank you very much. I urge an aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 50, noes 2. Measure passes. File items 30 and 31 pass and retain. File item 32, AB 912 on the amendments. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 912 with amendments by Assemblymember Gordon.
Mr. Gordon.
Madam Speaker and members, AB 912 relates to procedural changes to help facilitate dissolution of certain extraneous special districts. I've been working with CalAFCO and the California Special District Association on the language of the bill. These amendments reflect the agreement we've reached, and I would respectfully ask an aye vote on the amendments.
Seeing no further questions or debate, and without objection, we will take a voice vote on these amendments. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted. Out to print and back on file. File items 33 through 36 pass and retain. File item 37, AB 140. Okay, file item 33, AB 689 on the amendments. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 689 with amendments by Assemblymember Blumenfield.
Mr. Blumenfield.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, I rise today to present amendments to AB 689. These amendments make certain technical changes and clarify insurers' responsibility with regard to its agents. These amendments have been vetted with all of the stakeholders, and there is no opposition to them. I respectfully ask for your aye vote on these amendments.
Seeing no further questions or debate, and without objection, we will take a voice vote on these amendments. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted. Out to print and back on file. File item 34, AB 707. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 707 by Assemblymember Garrick, an act relating to horse racing.
Mr. Garrick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is a simple act, gentlemen, ladies, that has to do with horse racing in California and the satellite wagering. Horse racing in California already has the option of online wagering. This option also comes without any restrictions on the number of races per day, enabling bettors and wagers to, enabling wagers to bet on races all across the country that are viewed and in other countries. What this bill does is simply increase the number of races that will be imported by satellite from what is presently the law, which limits it to only 32 per day to 60 a day. I ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 54, no 0. Measure passes. File items 35 and 36 pass and retain. File item 37, AB 146. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 146 by Assemblymember Dickinson, an act relating to air pollution.
Mr. Dickinson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, AB 146 increases the composition of the California Air Resources Board from 11 members to 13. One of the 5 local air districts in the federally designated Sacramento non-attainment region would be one of the additional members. So that would be a member representing local government from Sacramento, El Dorado, Placer, Sutter, Solano, Solano, Yolo. And the 13th member would be someone with expertise in climate change. This bill is supported by the Sacramento Area Council of Governments, Breathe California, and the Lung Association, among others, and I would ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote.
We got
Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 42, noes 24. Measure passes. File item 38 passed temporarily. File items 39 through 46 pass and retain. File item 47, AB 1021. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1021 by Assemblymember Gordon, an act relating to elections.
Mr. Gordon.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. The democratic process requires transparency, an honest evaluation of the cost of government, and the understanding of the consequences of a vote. This bill would require that an advisory be added to the fiscal impact statement for initiative petitions and the ballot pamphlet. If it has been determined that the measure does not provide adequate funding or that reductions in spending to pay for the implementation of the measure would be required. Currently, the Department of Finance and the legislative analyst provide a cost analysis for petitions and the official ballot pamphlet. These analyses are great for a policy wonk, as they can run several pages with complicated details. This bill would add a simple statement to that analysis when the initiative would establish or expand a program that costs more than $1 million in any year. That statement would read, therefore, should the measure pass, its cost would have to be paid for from one or more of the following: reductions to existing state programs, revenue increases, or state reserves if available. For minimal cost, we can provide voters with information they need to know regarding the consequences of their vote. In so doing, we are allowing voters to make a fully informed decision while we provide transparency to our democracy. I respectfully request an aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 45, noes 21. Measure passes. File item 48, AB 1389. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1389 by Assemblymember Allen, an act relating to vehicles.
Mr. Allen.
Madam Speaker, fellow members, AB 39 is a bill that will establish uniformity in the way DUI checkpoints and vehicle impoundments are conducted across the state. AB 1389 codifies existing case law regarding how DUI checkpoints should be conducted and also how impoundments should be done. Currently, there's no set statewide protocol that is followed, and many jurisdictions consider the court cases just to be advisory rather than the ruling law of California. The guidelines are calculated to encourage community policing and to mitigate discussions about how the checkpoints should be discussed. It does focus law enforcement on the primary task of DUI enforcement, which is getting impaired drivers off the road. It also makes it clear that there are due process rights attached to impoundment of vehicles and possible forfeiture of the vehicles as well. So I urge an aye vote. Thank you.
Mr. Norby.
I urge an aye vote as well, Madam Speaker. I supported this in the committee and support it now. DUI checkpoints can be an effective tool to make our streets safer. Although the record nationwide is somewhat mixed, there are in fact 12 states where DUI checkpoints are banned completely, including the state of Texas. The state of Texas has declared that DUI checkpoints in fact are illegal under the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. These aren't bleeding heart liberal states. These are states that value individual liberties and are states that are quite attractive to business, including Texas, Wyoming, Montana, and others, where these checkpoints are simply not even allowed. Now, this bill doesn't go nearly that far, but it does say that they have to be targeted to addressing the issue of DUIs. If it's New Year's Eve, 1 a.m., fine. If it's 2 o'clock on a work day and people are trying to get to work and they're being pulled over by these checkpoints, they've complained to my office that these checkpoints in some cities are excessive, and they have nothing to do with DUIs. They're about fishing expeditions to seize cars, to sell them, to provide revenue for the police force. Bell, that was their policy. Checkpoints all day. Seize the cars if the person doesn't have proper insurance, if they don't have proper immigration identification, if they don't have a driver's license. Now, all these laws should be enforced, but should they be enforced by random checkpoints? I don't think so. Now, my own caucus has argued that this is a matter of local control and local police departments can do what they want, but there are 400 and some odd cities in California, and they need direction because all these laws, all these checkpoints are being done under state law, and they do need guidance. Some of these are being done because they're getting grants from the federal government to conduct checkpoints. So it's a matter of getting federal money to run the department, not because the checkpoint is actually needed. I think we need some guidelines here. I think they should be targeted to the problem rather than a fishing expedition, and I urge an aye vote.
Mr. Hill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I rise in support of AB 1389 as well, and I don't think anyone could say it better than Mr. Norby just did. But I just briefly wanted to comment. We need some guidance. We need to set some statewide standards for sobriety checkpoints. That's the important part, and the guidance from the previous court decisions are important, and that's what I know Mr. Allen is using for this. And the rationale is clear. DUI checkpoints are increasingly being used to impound vehicles for reasons other than driving under the influence. That's wrong. It's not right. It's not what it's not acceptable for this body to allow that to occur. Mr. Allen, I support your bill. Ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Jeffries.
Members, I rise in opposition, not because I think there's some abuses that are occurring out there with impounds, but this goes too far. This is a get-out-of-jail-free bill. Couple of scenarios here, and as one who served as a volunteer firefighter, this is going to facilitate the ability of more drunk drivers to get away with driving drunk and causing accidents. We do not need to facilitate that opportunity. If there are things that need to be corrected out there on the impounding of vehicles, fix that. But don't tell drunk drivers that we're going to make it easier for you to operate on our highways and our roadways in our communities. That is not something that this body needs to put their stamp of approval on. We need to correct this. This also has a provision that if you do not even have a driver's license, you will be allowed to continue driving away. There will be nothing that they can do to stop you if you are operating a motor vehicle on a highway and you do not have a driver's license. We can't allow that to happen. We have to make corrections out there, but we cannot go too far. I mean, look at this scenario of someone who is driving drunk and doesn't have a license. Which one applies? Can you still arrest them because they're driving drunk, or do you have to let them go because they don't have a driver's license? This creates too many gray areas. I understand the intent of fixing the issue on impounding vehicles. I really do, but do not facilitate drunk drivers being allowed to go more freely on our highways. Driving is a privilege. Driving vehicles on our roadways is a privilege. It is not a right. I encourage a no vote.
Ms. Halderman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. With respect for Mr. Allen, whose intents are, in my view, appropriate, I reluctantly rise in opposition to this bill, which I think is one of the more significant public safety endangering bills that we have seen in this session. An American dies every 22 minutes related to alcohol-related crashes. The amount of trauma we see in the United States is the equivalent of a fully loaded 747 passenger jet going down every day. It's not acceptable. It has to be weighed against our civil and constitutional rights, which are appropriately noted by Mr. Norby. However, there is a very easy way to not undergo impoundment as a result of drunk driving. Don't drink and drive. 0.08% is demonstrated to create a lethal circumstance. A car is a deadly weapon. At this point, I understand that there are concerns over the implementation of DUI checkpoints. Those concerns, in my view, are certainly not outweighed by what it's like to serve in the trauma unit on any given Friday night or 2 o'clock during daylight hours, which is certainly when people are entitled to drink, and believe me, they do. My perspective is that as a person who covers the trauma unit and gets to make the phone call that every parent prays they don't get to hear. I'm sorry, sir, she didn't make it. And maybe it wasn't her alcohol, it was somebody else's, but it doesn't matter to the family. We have got to do this responsibly. I understand your direction, sir, and I'm happy to talk to you about what are, in my views, ways to protect the public from this particular crime, drunk driving, but I don't believe this is it, and I respectfully urge a no vote.
Ms. Harkey.
Thank you. Madam Speaker and members, I also rise in opposition to this, and I do respect what Mr. Norby said. He is right on, that we are seeing an increasing amount of stops. But for any of you who have ever participated in a DUI checkpoint with your local law enforcement, you will find that they are signed way in advance several times, and anybody who's drunk and drives in that area is really over the top, because otherwise you would turn out well ahead of time. So I can't, and if you're caught without a license, anything else, I mean, it is the appropriate time. If you go through those areas that are very well marked ahead of time, then you're asking to be pulled over, or you're just not aware enough that you're going to be pulled over. And in either case, we should not be stopping this important checkpoint and limiting the ability to check for other items that may be of equal importance. So I do respectfully ask for your no vote. I appreciate the circumstances of the impoundment and the issues that Mr. Allen's trying to correct, and I do appreciate Mr. Norby's rights to freedom and infringement thereon. But I think this is a whole separate issue, and we need to keep this law in place. Allow our local law enforcement's maximum flexibility. Thank you.
Mr. Hernandez.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. As a former mayor, council member, I remember the times when DUI checkpoints were intended to do just that, check for drivers under the influence. And as the economy worsened and cities found themselves grappling to increase their revenues, I found DUI checkpoints across the San Gabriel Valley in the greater LA area and throughout California increase. About a year ago, I was driving to Rio Hondo Community College. I was an instructor there, political science, and I found myself jumping on board the 10 freeway. I was driving down the main thoroughfare in West Covina, California. And at about 7 o'clock in the morning, I found myself at a DUI checkpoint. Kind of uncommon, because usually it's around the holiday seasons, times of high frequency for DUI stops and DUI attainments. But this bill does not prevent those stopped for the driving under the influence to have their car taken away and impounded. This car provides for the opportunity for the unlicensed driver to call a friend who is licensed and to have that car removed safely. There is no reason for a 30-day impoundment or for an impoundment of a vehicle when someone happens not to have a driver's license. While they may be doing everything safely and not endangering any life, breaking the law other than not having a license should not subject someone trying to get to and from the work, someone that's struggling, to have the car impounded for 30 days. There's an abusive practice that's been taken across up and down the state. It's targeting people of low means, people that can't afford to pull their car after a 30-day impoundment. This is predatory practice that's been observed by many in the state of California. Mr. Allen is trying to correct the predatory practices that are taking place amongst the people we all represent collectively. I respectfully urge and I vote. Thank you very much.
Mr. Knight.
Thank you, Madam Speakers and members. I rise in opposition to this bill. I've heard many comments here on the floor. It seems like it's a good day to bash cops today. I'd like to know what the parameters would be when we do these checkpoints. Because if they had an event that happened on that weekend and there was drinking from 12 in the afternoon until 12 midnight, give me those parameters of when that checkpoint could happen, because it sounds like a checkpoint can only happen at maybe 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. So if those are going to be the parameters that this legislature is going to state for every community across the state of California, then we might lose out on some of these DUI drivers. Now, I would expect that nobody in here wants people driving drunk. I think that everybody's voting record has stated that. But it seems like we're going down a road that says the locals don't know what they're doing. And the other thing that was brought up was these grants that are used. Well, everybody has talked about their history today, so I'll say that I've worked DUI checkpoints at least 100 times, and I've worked under those grants probably 50 times. Those grants are very specific. You can't go out on these fishing expeditions. They have to be to do the DUI checkpoint, and you have to show what you've done. Because you know what? These grants come to these local law enforcement agencies, and they don't come back if you don't show any good from your DUI checkpoint. So I just wonder where we're going today to say that local governments don't know what they're doing. They're trying to get us on every turn, and we should stop that. We should say, we're the big bad legislature. We know what's best. Don't do this. These are your parameters, and that's all you can do. Let's let law enforcement do what they're supposed to do, catch bad guys. And you know what? If you stop at a DUI checkpoint and it stops 3 minutes out of your day and you didn't have a driver's license, guess what? You're breaking the law. You can't drive without a driver's license. That's kind of what we do up here, is make laws. So I oppose this bill on many, many issues, but just think about this, what we're doing to our local governments.
Mr. Wagner.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Reluctantly, I rise in opposition, not because it's an entirely bad bill. Indeed, I'd like to pull a couple of threads together. I think that Mr. Norby is exactly right. There is a lot to like in this bill. I would urge us, when we next have the opportunity, and perhaps as soon as we have the next opportunity, to take a look at our impoundment laws. Yes, you can avoid impoundment if you don't drive drunk. But if your spouse co-owns the car with you and your spouse drives drunk and you're sitting at home stone sober, you still suffer the risk of having your property impounded. The Supreme Court has said that's okay, but the Supreme Court, well, just this week said some other things that are okay we don't think are okay, in fact. So I'd like to take a look at impoundment and the infringement of liberty that it represents. That is a good component of this bill. I do, however, agree with my colleagues, Mr. Jeffries and Mr. Knight, that the bill goes too far in taking tools away from our local police. And for that reason, and because the bill tries to do too much, I'm reluctantly going to have to oppose it so that we leave the tools in place. And then let's please take a look at the impoundment tool at a later, hopefully not too far in the future date. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Mr. Alejo.
Madam Speaker, I rise in support of this bill, and I commend Mr. Allen. This is a bill I can't support him on, and I thank him for his leadership on this issue. And again, this is, I don't know if some of my colleagues are misunderstanding the bill or have read the bill, but this doesn't eliminate DUI checkpoints. It basically sets standards for how DUI checkpoints are to take place, and it's based on existing case law. California Supreme Court case, the Ninth Circuit Court case, and the federal courts have tried to set standards and guidance for law enforcement to follow, and this bill allows us to set that guidance in statute to guide our law enforcement of how to carry on these DUI checkpoints. It will still be a very good tool to apprehend persons driving drunk, but it would also address another issue, and anybody who's followed local DUI checkpoints have the data and evidence is overwhelming that the vast majority of those who are stopped and whose vehicles are impounded are people who are not being apprehended for DUI checkpoints. Those cars are impounded for over 30 days. Families lose their most important tool to get to work, to take their families to the grocery store, to take their children to school. It's economically devastating when you lose that vehicle. And sometimes the impound fees are so high that the impound fees are more than what the vehicle is worth. But it's economically devastating to so many different families. So we need to have that guidance. Let's make DUI checkpoints an effective tool for law enforcement, but let's not catch those that are, and provide another alternatives for those that are not being apprehended for DUI offenses. I ask for your aye vote on this bill.
Mr. Mansour.
Thank you. Members, I ask for your no vote on this bill for many reasons, but one reason in particular is that this creates a double standard. If you are here illegally or even legally and you do not have a driver's license and you are stopped, your vehicle will not be impounded for 30 days under this law. However, if you are here legally or are a U.S. citizen and you happen to maybe in the past had a DUI or you had a couple tickets or whatever, and for whatever reason your driver's license has been suspended and you are driving on a suspended license and you are stopped, your car will be impounded for 30 days. You will not have an opportunity to say, hey, to your friend, please come get my car so they don't impound it and take it home for me and give me a ride, as you would if you were here illegally and have no driver's license. You would have that opportunity under this bill. But if you are a legal citizen and you have a suspended license and you're driving with that suspended license, your car will be impounded for 30 days. That is a double standard. I urge a no vote. Thank you.
Mr. Cedillo.
Members, I've been working on this legislation for quite a while. All of you know that. I think I heard two agreements here this morning. One, the law is broken. There's an agreement here that the law is not working. Mr. Mansour just stated very clearly that there's a lot of problems that emerge from the law and some problems that may emerge from this legislation. We heard that there is the rule of law and that the courts have ruled on what we should do, and that this is an effort to codify what the courts have said so that we conduct ourselves in conformity with the rule of law. That's one agreement. Second agreement is drunk drivers are bad. They're dangerous. They're extremely dangerous, and they're not good for the highways, nor are they good for a whole range of other things in our society. And I agree with the good doctor. She pointed out incredibly amazing statistics about why it's important to get DUI motorists off the highway. Our current practice makes it easier for DUI motorists to evade the law. Now imagine this. It makes it easier. What has happened in practice, and Mr. Norby pointed to this, what has happened in practice is that local entities have taken the role of law enforcement from implementing the law and made them collectors. We saw this in the city of Bell, but we saw it also in the city of Pomona. We've seen the greatest abuse in the city of Los Angeles, where over the last 5 years, over $100 million have been collected in fees and fines of unlicensed motorists, but not DUI motorists. In the city of Pomona, they start at 8 in the morning on Saturday in front of a Home Depot. Now, I know a lot of people here have very strong records and actually in law enforcement and serving, but let me tell you, you don't have to be a cop to know that between a bar and a Home Depot, you're more likely to find a drunken motorist driving away from a bar. And yet, on Saturday mornings, DUI checkpoints with volunteers, with explorers, with sworn personnel and non-sworn personnel, over 1,000 hours of energy hunting down non-licensed motorists, not drunken motorists, but unlicensed motorists, for the purposes of raising revenue. And what does it say to the drunken motorists? Don't worry. They're so busy in front of the Home Depots and the Targets and in the low-income, primarily Latino, significantly undocumented communities that then I could spend all my time, as the maps have shown in Southern California, getting drunk in Beverly Hills and West Hollywood in Westwood, in Santa Monica. They don't have the arrests there where all the bars are. All the arrests are in South Central Los Angeles. They're not in Pasadena on Colorado Boulevard. They're in South Central Los Angeles, where who lives there? Low income, primarily Latino, undocumented, and because of the failure of our laws, unlicensed motorists. $100 million for the city of LA. We've been fortunate to have leadership like Police Chief Charlie Beck step up and say, this doesn't work for us. It makes it easier for drunken motorists, and we lose our trust from other members of our community who do not want to join us in providing information on crimes.
30 seconds.
And so at the end of the day, we have agreements. The law is broken. We must follow the rule of law. And this bill takes us in that direction. We need a common sense response to this challenge. And this bill takes us in that direction. I spoke with the commissioner this morning. We talked about our continuing effort working with Assemblymember Allen, myself. We're going to fix this problem, a common sense solution. I urge you for an aye vote.
Mr. Donnelly.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members.
Mr. Donnelly, hold on. Mr. Norby?
To a point of personal privilege, Madam Speaker, since my name was referred to 3 times, I believe I have the right to make a few comments in addition to my speech. I won't make 3, but I will make 1.
It's not a personal privilege under our rules.
I was told that it was by your majority
only if
leader.
your character is being attacked.
Well, I guess that's in the mind of those that spoke, but my name was referred to 3 times, and I've been told by several people when your name is referred to, you have the right to respond. But I'll leave that up to you.
Thank you. Mr. Donnelly.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I actually wasn't going to rise and speak on this bill until I heard some of the discussion, and I have to say that let me just give you one example to ponder. Instead of railing and ranting, I'm going to talk softly so that maybe people will hear me. But on a December night in the middle of the night, approximately 1 or 2 a.m., the guy who produced the movie we watch every Christmas, it's on all day long, Christmas Story, he and his son were coming back from a celebration on PCH. When a young man, 24 years old, named Hector Nava, who was in the country illegally, crossed the double yellow line and hit him head on and killed him. Killed both himself and his son. So I don't really care if Hector Nava had been arrested at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, or 7 a.m. in the morning. I don't care if he was arrested for being in the country illegally and having no license, or whether he gets arrested for being drunk. We need to take him off the road. And I think the problem that I have with your bill, I understand that you're saying that law enforcement shouldn't go out and say we're doing something for one reason. Well, fine. Then I think what they should do is say, hey, we're holding a checkpoint this morning to get unlicensed drivers off the road. Some people, if they find people who are drunk, I don't think they should not take them off the road either when you flip it over and reverse it. So I understand what you're trying to do, but I agree with Dr. Halderman. This is going to create a public menace. You're going to have more people killed, and we're going to have to answer for that. And I think that you should amend the bill and maybe dial it in a little tighter so that we can still protect the public whenever and wherever law enforcement sees the need. I urge a no vote. Thank you.
Ms. Torres.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I was not going to speak on this issue, although I feel very passionately about this issue, until the city of Pomona, the city on which I was mayor, was called out. And I must say that I'm very resentful at some of the comments of my colleagues, because as a former mayor in that city, we took the leadership to address a lot of the issues. Absolutely. Was there an 8 a.m. checkpoint? Yes. Were there targeted areas that should have not have been targeted in the beginning? Absolutely. But as the mayor and council member of that city, we addressed that issue. We no longer held vehicles for 30 days. It became a 3-day checkpoint. It became a 3-day vehicle hold. It became, if there was someone in the vehicle able to drive the car, they can do so if they wanted to. Now, I was targeted by members of this very body through nasty emails, text messages, campaign flyers, etc., 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 for standing up for the law. The law is the law. We either obey the law or we work together to change the law. And today, I am very happy to be able to have that opportunity as a state lawmaker to change the law for those folks in my city who were unfortunately targeted. While Home Depot should have never been targeted and a school should not have ever been targeted, maybe a neighborhood in the most affluent part of the community that had a bar, that had folks come in and drink in the parking lot of the Fairplex might have been a better place for them. And for those reasons, Mr. Allen, I am supportive of your bill, AB 1389. Thank you.
Seeing no further questions or debate, Mr. Allen, you may close.
Madam Speaker, fellow members, I'd just like to address some of the comments made by my colleagues, and I do appreciate the dialogue and the concern. Number one, I would like to emphasize that through this entire process, I worked very closely with local law enforcement, the CHP, and the ACLU. This is far from being a bashing of police officers. I respect their role, the mission of law enforcement. What I heard from a lot of law enforcement was the belief that we want to create a situation where local communities are not fearful of law enforcement but want to work with them for community policing. So my belief is that if opposition does surface later, it's going to be because of people reading newspaper accounts of this as opposed to reading the entire bill, and that all comments and concerns of law enforcement would be taken very closely because we're respectful of this and we want them to be able to focus their resources on catching impaired drivers. So at least on that issue, ladies and gentlemen, we are united that we want to get impaired drivers off the road. Regarding the impoundment issue, I think what's really important to realize about this is not a get-out-of-jail-free card or that there are not controls. Simply, the high courts have said, and it's a due process argument, that if for whatever reason your car is going to be impounded due to lack of license or other reason, if there's a less restrictive method, such as someone being able to come and pick up the car from the family or a friend who's licensed to drive the car away and the car can be parked safely, that it should not result in automatic loss of property without due process and possible loss of the vehicle forever because of the impoundment fees. So this law has been very closely tailored to respect the law and to make it equal for everyone and to have the rules understood. I think that when this bill becomes law, it's going to aid law enforcement because it's going to reduce some of the tensions in the communities when there's arguments about how DUI checkpoints should be conducted, how impoundment should be connected. It doesn't resolve all the problems. We're not the federal government. We're not dealing with immigration at this level like the federal government should be doing, but I do think it is a step in the right direction. I do urge an aye vote, and thank you very much.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll and tally the votes. Ayes 51, noes 19. Measure passes. File item 49, pass and routine. File item 50, AB 955. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 955 by Assemblymember Huber, an act relating to water quality.
Ms. Huber.
Thank you, Ms. Madam Speaker, I'll be very brief. AB 955 provides legislative guidance to the State Water Resources Control Board regarding septic tanks. It was support, and on the consent calendar, and I'll let the Republican caucus explain why it was pulled. I ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 66, no 0. Measure passes. File item 51, pass and retain. File item 52, AB 1083. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1083 by Assemblymember Monning and others, an act relating to health care coverage.
Mr. Monning.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, AB 1083 amends California law regarding small employer coverage, known as small group coverage. Like several dozen other states, California reformed its small group law in the mid-1990s to require guaranteed issue, guaranteed renewability, and to limit premium rating based on health status to a plus or minus 10% variant. The Patient Protection and Affordable Health Care Act, or ACA, requires us to make further changes, eliminating any rating based on health status and changing the size of employers that are covered. The bill has the following features. The bill keeps premium rates in effect for 12 months. The bill requires solicitors, agents, and brokers to notify the small employer about the California Health Benefit Exchange. The bill extends to solicitors the same requirements that currently apply to carriers with regard to prohibiting compensation arrangements that vary based on health status, claims experience, etc. This bill is needed to facilitate implementation of the Affordable Care Act. Members, I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Logue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I oppose AB 1083 because it implements federal health care reform when it's still being challenged as unconstitutional. California should wait until the President and Congress decides if there will be any changes before going it alone. I respectfully ask that we vote no on AB 1083. Thank you.
Dr. Halderman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I respectfully rise in opposition to this measure. It is not required for the state of California to enact this in order for the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act to be enacted in California in 2014. That's a matter of federal law. What's important to note about the provisions that are specifically mentioned in this legislation is that they've been tried already. We have a laboratory in which they were imposed. That's the state of Massachusetts. Under bipartisan legislature and a Republican governor, that was introduced in 2006. And similar measures that were introduced, just like this bill, have resulted in the following. Number one, waiting times for primary care visits have doubled. They now exceed 52 days in the state of Massachusetts. That's in contrast to Los Angeles County, where waiting periods are approximately 26 days. That's despite the fact that Massachusetts has the highest per capita number of physicians of any state in this country. The second part was the issue of, does guarantee issue make sense in the absence of an individual mandate? Guaranteed issue means no matter what your health condition is, no matter when you wait, even if you wait till you have a severe illness and never attempt to obtain health coverage before that illness, you will be issued a policy. It sounds humanitarian, but the result is predictable. The cost of care increases because those who do not bother to get insurance until they need it would have no incentive. And so that requires an individual mandate. That means that the federal government, and by extension the state, would force each of us to buy a product that we may not want, that we may not be able to afford, and that may or may not be consistent with our own faith or religious beliefs. That is the constitutional question with the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. Currently, over 26 states have brought that into federal jurisdiction, into the courts. And until that's settled, it is very important that the state of California not assume the debt for something that may be overturned at the federal level. The Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act mandates that we add 3.5 million Californians to the Medi-Cal rolls without any funding mechanism for it. It's not right for California now. I respectfully urge a no vote.
Mr. Nastandi.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Speaker. And I believe Ms. Haldeman actually just addressed many of these relevant points and did a very good job of pointing out the deficiencies in the federal bill and how it bleeds into the state bill that we are attempting to do. And I do agree, though, with the thought of planning. Planning is generally a good thing, and it is a good thing, I believe, to be out in front when we know a federal law is coming our way and with certain requirements. However, I think it's also fair to say that this federal law will change. I do think there will be differences in the Health Care Act, and so I think planning a structure right now wherein the rules will be changed federally, I'm afraid we're going to get stuck with a system that's going to have rate inflation. I think that's been studied pretty thoroughly. There will be adjustments in the rates going upward. Now, you can argue that the cost curve may bend a decade from now, but there's a lot of unknowns there. But I do think we'll see a rise in premiums now. And also there's uncertainty for small businesses in how you calculate part-time coverage and so forth. So I do think it's prudent to plan, but I do also think that we should wait for more debate federally and more rules to be promulgated federally before we move forward. As for no vote, thank you.
Mr. Donnelly.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, members. I rise in strong opposition to this bill. I understand the idea of trying to anticipate Obamacare coming down the tracks, but I think that there's some off-ramps that we might be able to take, and to saddle California with the destruction of our health care market. That's what you're really going to do. You're essentially destabilizing our entire health insurance market by forcing companies to cover things and take risks that they don't want to take. And then when the prices go up, what's going to be the next thing? You're going to have price controls. You're going to have the government coming in to fix a problem that the government created. And when you have price controls, then you're going to wind up with a normal, nice government model that basically says, let's give to everybody who has need, and let's forget about whether there's any relationship between the policies and the costs of them and whether or not a company can make a profit. And pretty soon you're just socializing the entire thing. I think this is a terrible idea. We have a good system. It does need some fixes. This is the wrong fix.
Mr. Davis.
Madam Speaker and members, I strongly support AB 1083. This whole value of whether or not citizens are entitled to health care and politicizing the implementation of the federal health care reform really has no place here in the legislature. It has already been voted on, and we realize there are many partisan efforts to undo what has already been done by Congress. And so it is smart that we provide an infrastructure, particularly for our small businesses, and there are many other constituent groups that need to provide health care that are not taken care of in this particular bill that must be addressed as well. This is a strong beginning for doing the inevitable, that which we must do. Even as we think about our own health individually, oftentimes we have choices. I've had choices. You have had choices. We may have something as simple as an inoculation that we don't like shots, but in fact, that shot might be the necessary thing we need to get well. As we look at what our goal is and our overwhelming responsibility is to the health care of Californians, it is time for us to put an infrastructure in place. We cannot fail to do here in public policy what we often can't fail to do with our own health. That is, we can't fail to delay. We cannot fail to delay the implementation of an infrastructure that will say that our core value is that not only do citizens in America and California deserve public education, but they deserve public health if they have not had the resources in which to have one. We can't leave people on the side of the road because of their inability and the lack of resources to have health care. We're not the only country in the world that has a health care policy that has currently been voted in place in this country. We look at countries like Great Britain, like France, like Canada, and an even small country like Cuba, all of which have some effort And I don't want to talk about the strengths and weaknesses of their program, but I want to say that I support this strongly. It is the first beginning of what we ought to really do in terms of providing an infrastructure. It is going to be cheaper to continue to move in the direction that Mr. Monning is leading us now than to regret it much later and finally it be more costly. So again, ladies and gentlemen, I respectfully ask and strongly support AB 1083.
Dr. Pan?
Yes, Madam Speaker, members, I too speak in favor of AB 1083. This is an important bill to be sure that we move forward in implementing important parts of the Affordable Care Act. Now, some of the previous speakers have stated that we don't know the future of the Affordable Care Act, although my guess is that it will be it's going to be substantially the same. But I think more importantly, what the Affordable Care Act and what this bill does is that it actually helps people who have to be in the small group and individual insurance market. In fact, as a small business owner, I do have to deal with the small group market because we only have a very small number of employees in our business. And that market is certainly challenged by our current structure of a healthcare system. The establishment of these rules to establish the exchange is going to expand the availability of health care to people in the individual small group market. That's going to be extremely important, not only expansion of the care, but also in helping restrain increases in healthcare costs in this market. Because right now, you have a situation where basically people, if you're sick, you find yourself being pushed out and made out of the market because basically your premiums rise to are unaffordable. What we need to do is create a more level playing field so that small businesses and individuals are able to purchase insurance and allow them to pool them together in a way that will help keep costs better under control and make it more available. I do know that a previous remark was made about what was happening in Massachusetts. In fact, I had lived in Massachusetts before I came here and have many links to physicians and the Medical Association in Massachusetts. While there have been some challenges in implementing the plan, I would say that overall, talking to the physician community there, they're very happy with the plan. And in fact, that was a very bipartisan plan. In fact, and I think that this bill is implementing a plan that really should earn bipartisan support because of what we're going to be able to do to help people in small businesses and to help individuals who desperately need care. So I urge your aye vote, and I really hope that we can move forward on this in 2014 as proposed in the bill. Thank you.
Ms. Harkey.
Madam Speaker and members, I was not going to speak on this, but I feel very compelled because of some of the comments that I've heard. I oppose this for a variety of reasons, but one is that there is rationing, and there are long, long lines in the UK, France. Cuba is abysmal, if you could even call that a health care system. They can't even feed their people. And Canadians come to the United States because of the waits. Massachusetts, it's been noted now for several months because of the governor who is running for potentially as a presidential candidate, that Massachusetts system is broke and should not be repeated anywhere. That's made all the press, and it's because it's not working. What we're setting up here, ladies and gentlemen, is rationed care, and there are many of us that in fact will be needing health care, the health care that our parents and that we are eligible for now. If we continue down this slope of trying to provide the care for everyone and trying to ensure that everyone has to have the care and pitting the insurance companies, the doctors and the hospitals against each other for strictly financial means, which is what I see happen all the time. They're always on different sides of the argument here. We're going to have nothing but standardized, state-run health care, for which we will be just like United Kingdom, France, Cuba, Canada. We can't pit the providers against the doctors and against the hospitals. This is all part of a unit. And we need them all to work together, and they all operate under a need for profitability. I've heard doctors complain here about the corporate practice of medicine. Well, that's exactly what we're headed down. very much so going to be the corporate practice of medicine, because that will be the only way you'll be able to get in to see a doctor. So I think we have a wonderful health care system. Does there need to be some changes? Yes. But I do believe that some of the Affordable Care Act will in fact be repealed, is unconstitutional, and therefore we should not be setting up something in anticipation of a law that's still under some attack and in the courts. I would hate to see California be a place where we would all have to go out of state for our care. Thank you.
Ms. Grove.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I, too, wasn't going to rise and say anything until Canada was brought up. And my daughter was in school in Canada a couple of years ago, and my youngest daughter and I went up to visit her, and my youngest daughter had a rollerblading incident with a parking meter, so we ended up in a Canadian hospital. I thought, wow, it was kind of cool because we walked right in. They immediately took us back. They did an x-ray, no questions of citizenship, nothing at all. And then we came out, and they said that she's going to need to see an orthopedic surgeon, and she's going to need surgery. And we said, okay. And our trip was still to be 3 weeks up in Canada, so we thought, well, let's see where this goes. So I looked at the slip, and I said, I'm sorry, I think you put the wrong date on my slip. And she goes, no, there is a 9-month waiting period to see an orthopedic surgeon. So to compare our great medical system with a Canadian system is just ridiculous. We have a great medical care system, and people in Canada are crossing the border to get treatment. And if you go up there, there is a long waiting period. So during this process, I asked if I could get a wheelchair or crutches or anything like that. They didn't have crutches. They didn't have enough. They had a brace that was 3 times too big for her leg, and they didn't have any of the equipment was there. So when you talk about rationing, if there's not enough stuff out there to give medical treatment, that's what Canada does. So I urge, this is just a really sad, sad bill, and I just urge a no vote.
Mr. Swanson.
Madam Speaker, let me thank Mr. Monty for this bill and his efforts to make sure that health care is accessible. I don't clearly understand how any member of this floor could have a problem with access to health care and making sure that Californians will not be subjected to the evils of pre-existing conditions and the loss of life that has resulted because pre-existing conditions have denied access to health care to so many. This bill and this effort is designed to assist small business, to make sure there's a healthy workforce, to make sure that women and children and men are not denied health care because of pre-existing conditions. How could you not embrace that? How could you not see how effective that is in saving all of us and the taxpayers of this state billions of dollars? Pre-screen in examinations. This is just common sense. And we will look back on this moment some years from now, and we will conclude how foolish we have been for so many years and not working to protect the health care of each other. I ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, Mr. Monning, you may close.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. It's interesting, the trajectory of this discussion. Let me tell you what this bill is about. This bill is about what's called the small group market, small employers. This is designed to protect both the employees of those small employers and the small employers. It's interesting that this bill is supported by the small business majority because employers recognize that they need protection from those that are selling health care products from doing risk direction and misdirection and predatory pricing in different markets in the state. This is not about Massachusetts. This bill is not about Canada. This bill is not about individual mandates. This is about the small group market. It's that and nothing more. We are in very constructive engagement with some of the current opponents to this bill, who I think have a much greater vested interest in navigating this forward in a manner that is fair and equitable. So, members, I respectfully ask for your aye vote. I ask you to remember what this bill is about and what it's not about, and that we are moving California forward in a manner to protect the interest of employees of small employers and those small employers. That's what this bill is about. I ask for your aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 41, noes 25. Measure passes. File item 53, AB 1210. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1210 by Assemblymember Garrick, an act relating to water quality.
Mr. Garrick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I think you'll find this bill far less controversial. I'm presenting AB 1210 to fix a misalignment between current law and the new regulations created in the or by the State Water Resources Control Board for Stormwater Pollution Plans, otherwise known as SWIPs. The Construction General Permit requires SWIPs, as stated, that all engineering work has to be performed by a licensed engineer. This includes in the SWIP water flow calculations, water load calculations, drainage and flow rate calculations, soil analysis, and soil stability calculations, all of which come under the practice of civil engineering. However, the Construction General Permit simultaneously creates the classification of qualified SWIP developer and qualified SWIP practitioner. Under this new regulation, both of these classifications can prepare all aspects of the SWIP after attending only a 2-day training class. One does not have to be a civil engineer to qualify to become a qualified developer or practitioner. Therefore, despite acknowledging this in the permit process, the civil engineering expertise is necessary to conduct SWIPs. The board expressly authorized non-licensed persons or people who don't have civil engineering degrees to practice within the scope of engineering. AB 1210 seeks to address this misalignment between statements of intent and application by only restating that civil engineering activities must be done under the responsibility or the charge of a civil engineer. I respectfully ask an aye vote.
Thank you. Support, support. Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 72, no 0. Measure passes. File item 54, AB 642. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 642 by Assemblymember Charles Calderon, an act relating to renewable energy.
Mr. Calderon.
Yes, Madam Speaker, members. For my next number, this measure, AB 642, provides California an opportunity to engage in an emerging technology that will redefine the way alternative energy fuels California and fuels our economy. Major progress has been made in the algae-based biofuel industry, and this is a promising alternative to fossil fuels. This bill would authorize the State Lands Commission to enter into a lease for algae-producing energy and agricultural products, which will then make it eligible for pilot project funding that is available for alternative energy. It's an exciting alternative. It has the potential, algae production has the potential to put California back on the map as a leader in innovation and technology. I ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 70, no 0. Measure passes. File item 55, AB 735. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 735 by Assemblymember Mitchell, an act relating to interns and student assistants.
Ms. Mitchell.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I'm proud to stand before you today and present AB 735. It's a simple bill that gives priority application status to current or emancipated foster youth who apply for student assistant or intern positions within state departments. These positions, as you all can appreciate, are a solid gateway to long-term employment with good pay and good benefits. Emancipated foster youth typically have unemployment rates double that of their peers who have never been in the foster care system. It's a great way to support them once that they've been involved in the system and emancipate out, that we can support their efforts to maintain stable employment and a healthy life. I ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 68, no 0. Measure passes. File item 56, AB 1131. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1131 by Assemblymember Lara, an act relating to telecommunications.
Mr. Lara.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, AB 1131 requires DGS to report the status of leasing state-owned lands to wireless telecommunication providers and issue recommendations for improvement. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 69, no 0. Measure passes. Okay, we are going to go back to two more bills. File item 35, AB 527. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 527 by Assemblymember Roger Hernandez, an act relating to public officials.
Mr. Hernandez.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Today I bring you a support bill. No opposition at this time. It's Assembly Bill 527, which would help restore the public's faith in government by ensuring that those who are given decision-making powers govern in an ethical way. AB 527 would prohibit public officials or employees from authorizing the approval of public funds if any member of the board or body or board or an employee in a managerial position has a financial interest in the person or non-governmental, I repeat, non-governmental entity that receives the expended funds. We have taken into account the concerns. We've addressed them. There is no opposition to the bill at this time. It's a support. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Norby.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have serious concerns about the bill, which I've expressed to the author, and I just don't have the comfort level they've been addressed, and maybe he can address them here on the floor. Certainly, we all oppose conflicts of interest, and we all oppose those voting on bills for which they may have a conflict. But if we cast the net too broadly, a lot of people are going to be caught into it that may not have a conflict at all. And some of us have been caught in that net in the past, and we don't want to be caught in it again. My concern about the bill, and maybe the author can address it specifically, is if one member of a board has a conflict, a city council member has a financial conflict, maybe a city council member is a manager of a McDonald's, and McDonald's is applying for a conditional use permit, he can't vote because he works for the company. But this apparently means that nobody on the entire board can vote as well, and if they do, there'll be a conflict, meaning that there wouldn't be a mechanism to approve these kinds of things. So I'm concerned about having too broad a net here that we're going to regret, and a lot of good people are going to be caught in it.
Mr. Cedillo.
Perhaps the question might be more specifically phrased is why would traditional conflict of interest laws not be applicable here?
Okay, Mr. Hernandez, seeing no further questions or debate, you may close and answer.
Thank you.
Sorry. Is that your question? Oh, question of the author? Okay, Mr. Hernandez.
Thank you. More than happy to answer the question. Today, government law, government code, Section 1090 already prohibits any governing body where there is a member that has a financial interest, any government body, the whole body, from voting on contracts. This speaks to when there's an individual member that has a financial interest to an outside, an independent. We've made amendments to remove governmental. This is just an amendment to 1090. In the case or scenario of the McDonald's seeking a permit for building, that would not impact a private for permitting process. This would be for the conveyance of taxpayer money. So this bill, again, there's no opposition. It's support, and it just kind of cleans up 1090 where a loophole has existed. Members, I respectfully ask for your vote.
Okay, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 55, noes 1. Measure passes. Okay, file item. The last file item I have today is file item 38. If there are any members ready to take up their bills, please come up and let us know. File item 38, AB 420 on the amendments. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 420 with amendments by Assemblymember Davis.
Mr. Davis.
Madam Speaker and members, these amendments removed a mandate for local government. It adjusts the implementation date to ensure more accurate data on the inmate population, deletes the Secretary of State from the bill, and makes other clarifying changes. I ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, and without objection, we will take a voice vote on these amendments. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted, out to print, and back on file. Okay, we've got 2 items on call. We're going to take up file item 57, the consent calendar. Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 75, no 0. The consent calendar is adopted. File item 14, AB 1248. Clerk will post. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 48, noes 19. Measure passes. This concludes the business on the daily file. We will now move to announcement and adjourn in memories. Mr. Calderon.
Yes, Madam Speaker, members, the Appropriations Committee will meet in room 4202 at 11:15.
Okay, today, Friday, May 27th, is the last day to notice intent to remove a bill from the inactive file if an author wishes to amend by Wednesday, June 1st. Tuesday, May 31st, is the last day in the Assembly to submit amendments to the desk by 5 p.m. or before adjournment if an author wishes to amend by Wednesday, June 1st. The session schedule is as follows. Monday, May 30th, Memorial Day holiday. Tuesday, May 31st, floor session at 12 noon. Wednesday, June 1st, floor session at 9 a.m. Thursday, June 2nd, floor session at 9 a.m. Friday, June 3rd, floor session at 9 a.m. All other items remaining will be passed and retained. All motions shall be continued. There are no adjourn in memories today. Mr. Calderon?
Yes, Madam Speaker, members, Sub 1 will meet at 12 o'clock, and Sub 2 will meet upon adjournment.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Chesbro, for what purpose do you rise?
Point of personal privilege, Madam Chair. I would like to congratulate Assemblyman Hueso on the return of his beloved dog Coco, who's been missing for several months, and somehow made it to Assemblyman Pereira's district before he was reunited with his master. In light of the national publicity it's received, I have to ask him whether or not he is being a publicity hound.
Thank you for your announcement, Mr. Chesbro. Mr. Calderon?
Yes, Madam Speaker, members, been a change in the meeting time for appropriations. Instead, it will meet upon adjournment.
Okay, I'm ready to entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Calderon moves. Mr. Hagman seconds. That this House stands adjourned until May 31st, Tuesday at 12 noon. Quorum call is lifted.